Hey there, I'm Erica, the tattooed grandma, the tattooed grandpa's better half, and I asked the tattooed grandpa if I could share something with you today. I once worked with someone that lied about something that I supposedly did not do, and they went on to tell others that we worked with that they had to remind me to do things, and that I had to be coached all the time on what I was responsible for. And I know this because this particular coworker, well, they sent me one of the texts saying that. And in that moment, I became so angry that I could literally feel the heat rise through my body. And right at that moment, I was trying to take my anger out on someone else. The Holy Ghost grabbed a hold of me. I shortly got an apology text from that coworker, and you know what? I had to continue working with this person. So I could say something or I could forgive them, and I chose to forgive. So I share this with you because I've been reading the parable of the unforgiving servant in Matthew 18:21-35, and I believe it's more than a lesson for all of us on what real forgiveness looks like. It should be an action or a behavior that is our first reaction when it comes to forgiveness. So let's jump in. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been wronged? Felt like the other person didn't deserve your forgiveness? Unfortunately, I am sure all of us can think of a time in our lives. You probably actually heard the name of the person when I asked, or even remembered that situation. Maybe they hurt you deeply. Maybe they never apologized. And, maybe unfortunately, they knew what they were doing was wrong. Every one of us wants mercy when we mess up. But we all struggle when it's time for us to give it to others. That's where this parable begins. So Peter comes to Jesus and asks a great question. Lord, how many times should I forgive someone? Up to 7 times? Now, that probably sounds generous. Most people would maybe consider 2 to 3 tops. But Jesus responds, not 7, but 77 times. Right there, I believe that Jesus is telling us that forgiveness isn't about keeping score, but about a transformed heart. And then Jesus tells them, and us here today, a story to explain this statement. So there's a servant who owes a king an unimaginable amount of money. Not a few dollars, not even thousands of dollars. It would be hundreds of millions of dollars in today's terms, which is an impossible debt to have to repay. The servant can't pay it, and he knows it. So the king orders that he and his family and everything they own be sold and the money given to the king. The servant falls to his knees and begs the king, saying, "Be patient with me. I will pay it back." But let's be honest. There is no way he could have paid it back. Now, looking at the servant and pleading, the king does something any one of us would consider shocking. He forgives the entire debt. He doesn't delay it. He doesn't reduce it. There's no deferment, but just like that, he completely cancels it. Can you imagine that? Now, this exact same servant goes out and finds another servant that actually owes him a small amount of money. Not even enough to truly change his life. especially compared to what he had just been forgiven. So instead of showing any mercy or love at all, he grabs him, chokes him, and demands, "Pay me what you owe." That second servant, he falls down and says the exact same words the man had just said to the king. "Be patient with me, I will pay it all back." But instead of any compassion or sympathy, the first servant, well, he has him thrown into prison. So other servants, well, they see this and they are so disturbed that they report it to the king. The king, well, he calls back that first servant. And guess what happens? He says to him, "You wicked servant, I canceled all of your debt because you begged me. Shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant, just as I had on you?" Then the king hands him over to be punished, and maybe rightfully so. Jesus ends with this warning. This is how our Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart. So what does this parable truly mean? In the most simplistic terms I can describe, the big debt, well, that's you and I. That massive, unpayable debt, it represents our sin. Not just the obvious stuff, but every failure, every wrong motive, and every time we have fallen short. It's a debt we can never repay. But God, he didn't ask us to. He forgave us in it completely. The small debt is what others, well, that's what they do to us. Now, this is where it's going to get real. See, the small debt, that represents what others have done to us. And let's be clear, what people can do to us, it will hurt deeply. This parable, it is not saying what happened to you didn't matter. It's not saying that it wasn't wrong, but it is saying no one can sin against you more than you have been forgiven by God. That's the perspective of this parable. Forgiveness is not optional. If we receive forgiveness, but then refuse it to others, we have missed the point completely. Forgiveness, well, it isn't saying what happened is going to be okay, trusting someone immediately again, or pretending it didn't hurt. Forgiveness is releasing the debt, letting go of the right to make them pay. Why is this important? Because unforgiveness, well, it does something to us. It hardens us, it traps us, and it keeps us living in the past. The unforgiving servant wasn't just punishing someone else. He was revealing that he didn't understand the mercy that he had just received. So here's the real question. What do you need to forgive? Not in theory, not someday. Who is that person who hurt you? That situation you replay in your mind? The offense you're still holding on to? Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation always happens. It doesn't mean boundaries are going to disappear. What it does mean is that we should always choose freedom over bitterness. Because when we truly understand how much we've been forgiven, we can become someone who forgives. If you and I stood before God with a debt that we could never pay, and then he wiped it clean, will you choose to live like the unforgiving servant? I wouldn't. Or like someone that's been radically forgiven. Because forgiven people, they forgive people.